You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the editor-in-chief of the National World Cities newspaper group, Nancy Fielder, and the Telegraph's leader writer, Tim Stanley. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Lion hearts broken. That's how the Mirror describes England's World Cup quarter-final defeat to France tonight. Harry's pain. That's the Sun's verdict on the England captain's feelings after missing that crucial penalty. This is the Times. All over for England again. The Star uses a French expletive in its post-match analysis. And to the People, the England team are Qatar heroes. The Observer understands the Royal College of Nursing and the Unison Union have offered to suspend their forthcoming strikes if the government agrees to substantive negotiations over pay. Speaking to the Sunday Telegraph, the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, describes health unions as hostile and says the NHS must reform or die. The Express has been speaking to former Labour Home Secretary David Blunkett, who says that the Christmas strike wave could cost the country £4 billion and lose Labour the next election. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Nancy Fielder and Tim Stanley. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the Sunday Times and obviously the story that most of the papers are covering and that everyone is living dreadfully this evening. Their headline, it's all over for England, full stop, again. Nancy.
Well, yes, I mean, that sums it up, doesn't it? We had very high hopes, but let's admit it, we do every match and we do every big competition. And I, like most of the country, did believe that it was coming home, and sadly it's not. But this was a really, really good match, and the team played so well. There were so many chances. I mean, there was obviously Harry Kane's missed penalty, but the second half was full of brilliant football. And I'm not convinced, maybe this is just what English people say, but I'm not convinced that we were the worst team. I think we played incredibly well. We definitely should be coming home with our heads high. And it's not exactly what England deserved for Christmas, and it's going to be a fairly grim Christmas for lots of us. But do you know what? It wasn't a World Cup where you'd got quite the excitement that we normally had. I'd seen only 3 cars with the England flags flying around Sheffield in the last month, and normally you see hundreds. So maybe it just wasn't our World Cup, but we've got some really good young stars, and maybe next time round we'll bring it home. You never know.
Yeah, you're not the only one to say that they actually played well and probably didn't deserve to lose tonight, at least anyway. Tim, what was your reading?
Oh, well, I'm afraid I didn't see the match. But I know that England lost. It was 2-1 to France. So well done, France. I don't...
No, they're not supposed to say that.
Oh, no. OK, well, I think I was supporting Wales. I think I was supporting Wales in this championship.
OK.
I'm afraid I'm a supporter of football. But obviously, it was a game that many people have been watching, and I'm sure England supporters are very upset by the result. But hopefully the television will now go back to normal.
What's your view on the way it's covered by the papers, then, a more sort of general view?
Oh, well, obviously, all of them have put it on the front page. I was working the Telegraph this evening, and we were waiting for the right image before we could send it off to the printers. That's very important. You've got to get the image which captures that particular moment in the match, in which something's missed, or someone's celebrating and someone's joyful. It's all about waiting for the right sort of image. But obviously, the newspapers have all put it on the front page. Because football's very important to people, and the whole country would have been watching it, except me. I'm afraid I was on a train.
Nancy, the front page of The Sun really says it all. We've got Harry Kane there literally biting his shirt, and you can feel his pain through that photo, can't you?
It was his immediate reaction as soon as he'd kicked the ball. I mean, yeah, it was a penalty. But actually, it is that picture on the front of the Telegraph and that smaller inset picture there. It was a fantastic manager going over to a striker who has done England really proud for many, many years and many competitions. And I would love to have heard what he whispered in his ears. But he just went around and he really picked up the team. And this is why there is hope. We've got a really strong manager. Let's hope he sticks with us. Let's hope he brings through some of the younger players. And they played really well as a team, France have got some incredible individuals, but England were a really, really good team tonight.
Yeah, that photo that you're showing is the manager hugging Harry Kane. We can see that he has sort of got form for that, hasn't he? Because remember with the Euros, there were the shots of him hugging Saka, and you do get the sense that he does really care about them as individuals.
He does, and he needs to, because we all know the grief that comes. Perhaps, I don't really want to bring race into it, but perhaps there will be less abuse on this occasion because the person who missed it is Harry Kane. However, let's look at what the manager is doing. You can see he really cares. And it's not easy for him either, is it? But he is a great leader to go around and to pick up his team and to be the one that says, come on, it's all right. Maybe we haven't done it this time, but maybe we do next time. And there are some really, really nice, caring images. And actually, the front pages reflect that England did us proud, and that's quite nice to see. There's no bullying here, although I'm sure there is online if you look hard enough.
Tim, we move on to the Star. They've attempts at a French headline, and we saw the shots from Paris this evening. The Champs-Élysées lit up with fireworks, and the French fans out on the streets. They could go on to be World Cup winners for a successive year, the second year in a row.
Oh, did they win it before? Well, if they do, I mean, that's quite good for France. I thought Germany was always a team that was good at football. Brazil, but they got knocked out by Morocco. I know that because everyone's now supporting Morocco as the new underdogs. That's the new popular team, it seems to be. But obviously, just because, if there's a loser, there's also a winner, and good luck to them. And I hope they all enjoy the contest and may the best man win.
Yeah, or team. We'll leave the pictures, the Champs-Élysées, spectacularly lit up, I have to say. And you can imagine the street parties going on all night. Let's move away from the football to the Observer now. And it seems as if the unions are open to calling things off if pay is discussed and progress is made in the direction that they're hoping for. That's the front page of the Observer. Nancy.
Yeah, I mean, this is much more of a disgrace than any of the performances that the England team put in, because this actually really shines a light on who is causing the problem here. And everybody's talking about how scared we all are because the key people in our health service aren't being treated well enough to want to continue working. By definition, they are carers. This is what they do. But they actually also care about their working conditions and their pay. And this story says that they're willing to put it on hold, to not have these strikes that the government is so angry about. If only the government would sit down and talk to the unions. And I think the fact that they have to say that just says so much. There is so much disrespect. This is being caused by a government that doesn't treat people fairly, that has had 12 years to make an NHS better and has brought it to its knees. There have been other circumstances, but a lot of this is at the government's door. And if they can't even be bothered or take the time to sit down and have the conversations with the people who care for our health, there's not much hope, is there?
Yeah, it's quoted as Pat Cullen, General Secretary of the RCN, saying that she's prepared to press pause on industrial action if the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, agrees to meet to thrash out a deal. And they're saying that Barclay has held only 2 meetings with them in the last few weeks, Tim.
Yes, and this reflects complaints made by the RMT as well, who've said that ministers have not been willing to sit down with them and discuss train strikes. The government's trying to adopt a position here of saying, of trying to stand back from negotiations and allow stakeholders to debate it between themselves. But at the same time, it won't actively go to war with trade unions. So it just makes the government look a little bit impotent. But if the nurses were to go on strike, that would be a very serious business. It would be happening this coming week. It's predicted that up to 15,000 operations could be cancelled. And we're talking that's all in the context of historic waiting lists, with around 7.2 million people waiting for treatment. Now, the nurses were asking for about 90%. The government said that is just too much. And as we'll see from the Telegraph front page, Labour has said that it probably wouldn't be able to pay that amount if it was in government either. But it now looks like the nurses are hoping to sort of transfer that 19% into a negotiating position so they can come up with something closer to the deal they're getting from the Scottish government on pay. So fingers crossed. I think most people will be quite relieved if that particular strike gets called off. But of course, there are still strikes going ahead on the trains, strikes on ambulances. strikes on border policing at airports. We're looking forward to a sort of second winter of discontent. And as I say, the big question is the government going to really go to war with the unions, or is it finally going to sit down with the individual unions and strike pay deals, even if they're well above what the current inflation rate is?
Yes, we shall see. Time, though, is of the essence. Tim and Nancy, for the moment, thank you. We are going to take a break. Coming up, we'll discuss concerns over the rapidly rising cost of antibiotics for Strep A. Do stay with us. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Nancy Fielder and Tim Stanley. Welcome back to both of you. Let's take a look at the Times and this story that we've featured for the last couple of days, actually, on Sky News. And this is the rising cost of the antibiotics for use in the treatment of Strep A. Tim.
This is a very troubling concern. As you know, there's been an unseasonal outbreak of Strep A, which has led to the death of 16 children. And pharmacies say that they're having difficulty supplying the antibiotics that people need over the counter because the cost has gone up so dramatically, purchasing them from the pharmaceutical companies. To give an example, according to the Times, normally capsules cost normally only cost a few pounds to purchase capsules from the pharmaceutical companies, between £3 and £4 for oral mixtures. But some of the prices that have now been quoted by the companies are £10.67 for a penicillin oral solution, or another one is £15. And the problem, of course, is that pharmacies then can't recoup those kind of costs from the NHS. And this is then leading to shortages at counters. Now, the question is this about price gouging? Is this companies taking advantage? Or is this, as pharmaceutical companies say, down to rising costs from manufacturers? Either way, given this outbreak of Strep A, it's a story that will be very concerning, which the government, no doubt, will step in.
Yes, Nancy, that is the question, really, whether it's ethical for these rises at this particular time.
It can't be ethical, can it? It feels very similar, this, to us all having to worry about having the heating on at times when companies like Shell and BP are making billions more in profits. I mean, how you can profiteer off children dying and parents being terrified. There are so many concerns at the minute, and this is just an additional one. But it is really, really scaring our readers. I mean, in our web figures, every time there's a reported case or concern around a case in a school, everybody needs to know about it. Everybody wants to know about it. It's a really important public service that people are informed. For them not to be able to get the medicine and for them to be overcharging for medicine when people are absolutely desperate is disgusting, really. And it just shakes your faith in the pharmaceutical industry. And it wasn't that high anyway, often.
And Tim, it comes to something when this is forcing parents of sick children to travel in search of medicine because they're not able to get their hands on it.
Yeah, precisely. And up against, in the context of everything we've discussed just before the break, about queues on the NHS, about waiting lists, other concerns like that, it just adds to people's sense that systems are not working properly and that people are getting a rough deal at a very difficult whole time of year.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in the Sunday Telegraph, we read that the shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is warning that the health service is a service and not a shrine, and it needs to reform or die. This is a very different line for Labour, isn't it, Nancy?
This is a very, very different line. And one that I can't help but think is a huge mistake. If the Labour Party is saying it doesn't support doctors and it doesn't support nurses, and it's doing that by attacking the unions, then it just seems an extraordinary U-turn, effectively, on the history of the Labour Party, and really, really bad timing. I think there is huge support for the people who keep our NHS running. Every day, newspapers across the country still get letters from people saying, do you know what? I was in hospital, I was on whatever ward, and the staff were incredible. And it's really, really hard for those staff. But I just want to write and say thanks. And that's because we all see these people. We know these people. They're our friends. They're us. They're people doing a really, really tough job. And for the Labour Party now to say that it's them who's stopping the reform and they're holding the NHS back, this just sounds massively out of kilter with what the public think. And I mean, the Labour Party are where they are because the Tories are making such a mess. It's not because of fantastic Labour Party policies. So, how you get elected when you're throwing something like this into the mix? Well, I've no idea, to be honest.
Tim, just how significant is this? Because Labour relies heavily on union support. We read here that it's accepted more than 15 million from unions involved in this winter's strike.
This is a very significant political development. Up until now, Labour's position on the NHS has largely been to sit back and demand cash. That's changed for two reasons. One, because strategically trying to move towards the centre, recapture some of that Blairite style of 97. Remember, 97, Blair actually ran to the right of the Tories on things like tax and crime. Likewise, they're trying to say on Brexit, on asylum, and now on the NHS, we can be just as tough-minded as the Tories. But the other issue is that Labour is very probably going to win the next election. And when they do, they're going to take over an NHS which has enormous waiting lists, in which more money has been poured into it, historic amounts, but it's not reaching the front line, including pay. Wes Streeting himself, in the interview with the Telegraph, says that he has been waiting for scans. He's been waiting for the results of delayed scans for personal cancer treatment. So he personally knows the effects of these waiting times. And what he's saying is we are not going to put more money into the NHS without pledges of reform and without personnel saying they're going to deliver more. And one thing he identified as something he's very angry about, for example, was the BMA voting that GPs would limit working times between 9 and 5. How are you going to clear the waiting times backlog if doctors are behaving in that fashion? So it's not just Labour strategically positioning itself to the right of the Tories, it's also Labour recognising that it's going to have to take over the running of the NHS, it's going to have to reform, and one thing Labour is saying it will do is it will actually expand the use of private health. That's why this is a very significant moment. Labour has moved to the right of the Tories on healthcare.
Yes, it is significant in that extent. But Wes Streeting is definitely speaking from, excuse me, from a personal perspective, saying that the health service is facing an existential crisis with appalling difficulties accessing care. Is he wrong, Nancy?
No, he's absolutely right. Is it the fault of the nurse and the doctors who are thinking of going on strike, who are threatening strike? No, it's not, is it? There are reforms needed. And actually, if you speak to people in the NHS, there are individuals in there who have great ideas for reform, and reform is possible. The NHS does not need to die, but we all also know it doesn't need to be where it is. But it's not the people within the service who are providing the service who are creating the problems. And look, he has got personal experience, but haven't we all? I mean, one of my best friend's granddad died on a trolley after 24 hours sat in A&E just a couple of weeks ago. There are so many people who are suffering because the NHS isn't run properly. But to go up against the people who run it is not the right way. Talk to them, work with them, because they want it better. Why shouldn't a doctor work 9 to 5? That surely there has to be solutions that don't include running people into the ground and forcing them to leave the NHS because they can't cope with the circumstances anymore.
Nancy, thank you. Sorry for your loss. Thank you both for contributing to that newspaper review.